So welcome to our tax town hall today. My name is Ann Malik. I am the clinic director of the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic at the Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York. And we are joined by our staff attorneys from the clinic, Joe Orzechowski and Shar Pan, also by PJ Hearn, who's from our Canton office, and Andrew Kochian from United Way Cash Coalition is going to talk to us about VITA. Our low income taxpayer clinic covers 16 counties from Columbia, Greene County up to the Canadian border, over to St. Lawrence County and down through Fulton and Montgomery counties. It is free. And anyone who has tax questions can call us at our 833 number, which is 833-628-0087. We do offer representation in disputes with the IRS. For that, there are some income guidelines, and we can discuss that. However, anyone is welcome to come in for advice on income tax matters. So I think we should get started. Joe, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I'll just briefly introduce myself. My name is Joe Orzechowski. I'm a staff attorney with the Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York. I work in the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. I've been an attorney for about 22, 23 years. I was a civil trial attorney for 6 or 7 years. I spent 10.5 years working for the IRS as an appeals officer in the IRS Office of Appeals. Obtained a lot of experience with tax matters during that time. And then I have been here as a staff attorney in the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic for about 2.5 years. So we assist clients with their tax concerns, whether they might have a balance due or they're expecting to get a refund. So that's just a little bit about me. And I wanted to turn it over to our other staff attorney in the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. His name is Shar Pan, and myself and Shao are going to be reviewing with you today some issues that you might be encountering with respect to your taxes. We're going to address tax concerns that we're seeing here quite frequently in the tax clinic, and offer you some advice and some suggestions. But I want to turn it over to Shao for a brief introduction as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Shar Pan. I'm also staff attorney at the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic at Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York. I've been with LASNNY since 2019. Again, thank you for joining us today.
So we recognize that many of you may be viewing a recording of this presentation. We're going to place a recording on our LASNNY Facebook page for you to review at a time of your convenience. And I expect that we'll also have a copy of this recording on our LASNNY LITC webpage.
Anyone who has questions, we had a question in the chat, who wants to call in to speak with one of our staff attorneys. The number is 833-628-0087, and we can have an intake done for you. There will, as Joe said, also be an opportunity to do that for people who are watching the recording, and I'll put that over in the chat as well.
Yeah, feel free to contact us if you have any questions or concerns about your tax matters, federal income tax. We can offer advice to anyone, regardless of their financial circumstances, if they have some question or concern about their income tax matters. And then we can provide representation services to those individuals who meet our income qualification guidelines. But just might as well just get right into it here. The filing season is obviously not open yet because the calendar year has not ended. The IRS will open the filing season in late January. The IRS generally opens the filing season the last week of January, and the IRS will make an announcement as to when the filing season opens, generally about a week or two before that date happens. So around the middle of January, we'll be watching for an IRS press release as to when the filing season is going to open. So that's relevant because you can't file your income tax return before the filing season opens. The IRS opens the filing season, then you can file your return. You file a 2022 Form 1040 to report your taxes, your deductions, your credits in February, March, or April of 2023. We highly recommend that individuals electronically file their returns instead of using the post office to mail the return to the IRS. So if you mail, and I was just on the phone with someone this morning about this, who was unable to electronically file and had to mail his returns to the IRS. If you're seeking a refund and you don't owe money on the return, you would mail the return to Kansas City. The problem is if you use the post office and don't electronically file, you're looking at 6 to 12 months easy to get your refund check. So if you electronically file the return, generally, if there aren't any issues or concerns noted by the IRS, you should receive your refund in, say, 3 to 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, 4 to 7 weeks, somewhere along that time frame. And we also recommend clients and taxpayers place their banking information on page 2 of the 1040 in the space that is provided on the form. And by doing so, you'll be asking the IRS not to send you a paper refund check, but instead to electronically deposit that refund into your bank account, be it a checking account or a bank account. If you place your banking information on page 2 of the return in the boxes that are provided for you to do that, you'll speed up the amount of time it takes to get your refund check by perhaps maybe a week or two. So if you're looking to get a refund payment faster, electronically file and put your banking information on page 2 of the return so the IRS can route the refund payment electronically to you via a direct deposit. The IRS can do that, and that speeds up the processing of your return. If you have to physically mail the paper return to the IRS using the post office, it will be 6 to 12 months, most likely at the earliest, that the return is processed, assuming that there aren't any problems with the return. I also had a client recently contact me, and he told me that he was getting an extension. Keep in mind that an extension of time to file a return is not an extension of time to pay any tax that might be due. So everyone in the country is under an obligation to pay any tax that might be due by the traditional April 15 deadline. I used to tell folks when I was working for the IRS, there's no form or magical form that you can find on irs.gov and file with the IRS to get an extension of time to pay any tax that might be due. Any payment would still be due on the April 15 deadline. An extension is just an extension of time to file the return. So I was speaking to someone yesterday. If you do file an extension for an extension, it's only an extension of time to file. You estimate what your tax liability will be, and then you make that payment, an estimated payment, before the April 15 deadline. We will be talking extensively today about the free income tax preparation and e-filing resources that are available to you in the community and online. And we have Andrew here from the United Way, a Greater Capital Region, who will be speaking in more detail about that. But there are free resources online and in the community that you can use to prepare and file your income tax return for free electronically. The IRS has companies that it's partnered with, and these are called free file partners. The IRS has free file partners. So if you do a search on irs.gov of free file, hit enter, and then the links to where you can identify these partner companies will pop up for you. And you can click on them. You can create an account if you don't already have one. And then you should be able to prepare and electronically file the return for free. Now, I caution you, there are income qualification guidelines in order to be able to use the free software online with the IRS partners. I believe last year the income cutoff was about $65,000 a year. They haven't come up with the new income qualification guidelines for 2023. It should still be at about that same level, somewhere in the $65,000 per year of income. If you make less than that, then you should qualify to use the free links on irs.gov to create an account, prepare the return, and electronically file it, transmit it to the IRS. Some of those sites also allow you to electronically file a New York State income tax return. So one tip that we wanted to offer you today was, if you're using the links that are available to you on irs.gov to file for free a federal income tax return, select the provider, because there are about 10 or 15 of them that offer these services. Select the provider that also allows you to electronically file the New York State income tax return for free, because not all of the links will allow you to do that. And certainly if you go through the United Way and Andrew's services and his folks, they can electronically file the federal and New York State return for you as a matter of course. The IRS is still very, very backed up with respect to their operations. So again, remember to electronically file the return in lieu of mailing it via the post office to the IRS. Because of the IRS delays, it could easily be 6 to 12 months before you receive that refund payment. Also, your employer will send you out a W-2 in January after the calendar year has ended. Remember to save and retain that document, because you do need the W-2s and the 1099s that arrive in your mail in order to prepare your taxes. I did want to turn the presentation over now to Andrew Kochian, a great guy. We've known him for a number of years. Andrew operates a program out of the United Way Greater Capital Region. He staffs offices throughout the Capital District and the Capital Region. And the volunteers in his office prepare income tax returns and file them for folks living in the community for free. So Andrew is an accountant for DePaul Housing Management. That's a nonprofit which provides low-income, affordable senior housing. And he's also the VITA program coordinator for the United Way Greater Capital Region. So I'm going to turn this over to Andrew so he can talk a little bit about the free income tax preparation and filing services that will be offered in the community.
Thank you, Joe, so much. So thanks, guys. Yes, so I'm here today just for probably like maybe 5-10 minutes, just to go over what VITA is and the good it does, for our clients. So VITA stands for Volunteer Income Tax Assistance. It's a national IRS volunteer program in which volunteers like myself and many, many others do prepare free income tax returns for low-income clients. Now, we will do, of course, the federal returns, and then we will also do state returns as well. So, of course, for us, that will mostly be New York returns, but we can do other state returns as well, and we can actually do multi-state returns as well. So if somebody moves, from one state to another, most of our sites can do those returns as well. So I say low income. So in our VITA program, we do have an income limit set by the IRS. Generally, it's increased about $1,000 each year for inflation. This year, it's $60,000. So that's either as a person filing single or a married couple filing jointly. So like if you're married filing jointly, it's not $60,000 per spouse, it's still the $60,000. Now, even though it's a limit, it's not a hard limit. So if you happen to come into a VITA site and you make, say, $62,000, $63,000, most VITA sites will still see you. It's basically up to the discretion of the manager of the VITA site, but most VITA sites will still see you. So it's not like a legal hard limit, but we do try to keep to that limit as much as we can. So as Joe mentioned, there are various VITA sites, across all 5 counties around the area here. So most of our VITA sites are here in Albany. That's where the I would say biggest VITA sites are usually located. But of course, we have some out in Saratoga and Rensselaer, all over the 5 counties. Depending on where you go, the VITA site may stick to the sort of in-person tax prep model where, it's done usually same day. You'll sit with the volunteer and they'll do it for you that day. Usually it'll take somewhere between about maybe 45 minutes to maybe like an hour usually per return. Some sites are more virtual. So those will involve usually you going to the site, dropping off your tax paperwork. A volunteer there will scan it in to their system, and then their volunteers will do it later, either at the site or from their offices or at home. And then you would come back like the next week to actually pick up a hard copy. So it depends on where you go. In Albany, usually you'll find the VITA sites will be in person. Not all of them, but most of them will be in person. And then some sites will be a hybrid. Some will be in person, some will be virtual if you prefer it that way. Now, besides actually, managing the VITA program as a whole in the 5 counties, I also run my own site at the Catholic Charities Albany VITA site at 40 North Main Avenue in Albany. It's right across the street from the College of St. Rose. In Albany, we will have probably the most amount of appointments available just because it's going to look like we're going to have the most volunteers at our site. So you may actually run into me if you come to the Catholic Charities VITA site. We will be open on Sunday mornings. At our peak, we're still working on it. We should have about probably 80 open appointment slots on Sundays at our peak. Most likely, that's still in the works though. So if you're in the area, our site will be open on Sundays. But of course, during the week, there will be other, really good VITA sites as well. Now, in order to make an appointment to get your taxes done, well, actually, before that, I do want to also speak about scope limits. So besides an income limit, we do also have scope. We do have a scope limits as well. Basically, what that means is that depending on what sort of tax events happen to you during the year, we may or may not be able to do your return because the IRS considers that to be too complicated. So for example, the biggest scope limit is rental income. So if you rent out your house or you rent out a house and you make money from that, we as VITA sites cannot do those returns because the IRS considers that to be too complicated. Another big one is if you finished bankruptcy proceedings during the year, that may or may not have a tax impact. But if you finish bankruptcy during the year, we also cannot do those returns because they may have a tax impact that we just can't handle as as free VITA sites. Okay. Someone in the Q&A had a question, a very good question actually. They had a IRA conversion, so they converted from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA during the year. That is a good question. That is another type of situation that we cannot do. So even though your income limit, even though your income may be below 60,000, for example, because you made that conversion, it'll have some tax consequences that we, as free Vita sites, are not supposed to handle, because again, we're free. So in that case, you would have to go to a paid tax preparer. So that's a good question. In order to make an appointment with Vita, you'll call the number 211. So it's like 911, but 211. 211 is it's a free social service hotline. It can refer you to many, many different types of services like, housing, food, and then of course, taxes. Once you call, it'll say press 5, for example, press 5 for taxes. So you press 5. You will be on hold for a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, it might take a little while, because at our peak, during the peak tax season, a lot of people call. So you may be on hold for at least a couple minutes, but eventually you will get a hold of an operator, and then you just let the operator know that you want to get your taxes done for free. They will ask you where you live, and then they'll give you, a different range of Vita sites that are in your area. Okay, and then the operators will ask you some questions just to make sure that you qualify for the program, and then again they will, tell you which sites are open. Not all sites will use 211 for their appointment making. So for example, my site at Catholic Charities, we do use 211 for appointment making. So if you call 211 and you ask specifically for Catholic Charities, the operators will be able to make you an appointment right on the spot there, at our Sunday location at 40 North Main Avenue. Some sites don't have appointments set up with 211. So in that case, the operators, if that's the site where you want to go to, the operators will instead refer you to the agency's phone number. And then you'll just call that phone number, you'll speak to their front desk staff there, and that's how you make their appointment. So some sites use 211 for appointment making, some don't, but just in all cases, just call 211. And then from there, they will either make your appointment right then and there, or they refer you to the Vita site themselves and their phone number. In terms of when you call, I would, so we don't have a hard date yet of when we're going to have appointments like really available yet. I will be working very early in January to make sure that we have at least some Vita sites have some slots available right in the beginning of January. I'm going to be working very hard on that. But as a general guideline, I would call 211 about the middle of January. Just to see if anyone's open. We should have some appointments for some sites, particularly in Albany, I would say, available at that time. So I would call about roughly mid-January, perhaps maybe a little bit before. And if it just so happens that nobody's set up yet, the operators will let you know to call back later. There should be some available by about mid-January, but you call then. Call at that point, mid-January, call earlier rather than later. Okay, because again, about February, March, a lot of people call. We have about roughly 4,000 people usually call us during the tax season. So definitely call earlier rather than later. Okay, and one other thing is, if you make an appointment through 211, so let's say you make an appointment at, say, Catholic Charities, please make sure that you can keep to that appointment. Okay, so what we tend to experience sometimes is some folks, not all folks, but some folks will call 211 about mid to late January. They'll make an appointment for, say, Catholic Charities sometime in like early April or late March, but then they won't show up. Because during that time period, they would have already gotten their taxes done at another, location or whatever, but they don't call back to cancel their appointment. So please make sure that, if you make an appointment, you keep to the appointment. If you have to cancel it, you can either call back 211, or depending on the site that you made an appointment with, you may actually get a text message confirmation about your appointment, and you're able to cancel your appointment by replying to the text message. I know Catholic Charities will have that feature, and there will be other sites in Albany that will have that feature too. So just please make sure to keep your schedule, and if you have to cancel, please cancel it, because a lot of people are going to be calling and wanting to get into a Vita site. The only other thing I want to mention, and this is extremely important for us, is what documents to bring. So briefly, before you arrive to your appointment, please make sure that you have your social security card, which can either be the original, a copy, or a picture on a phone. That's fine too. A photo ID, which will, mostly be a driver's license, but it could be any type of photo ID. And then if you're filing with your spouse, they should also have their social security card photo ID. And if you're claiming dependents, you should also bring their social security cards as well. We 100% cannot do your returns unless you bring your social security card and photo ID. A substitute for the social security card is a social security benefit statement. So that's that form with the pink box at the top right that shows you how much social security benefits you earned during the year. The form is called a SSA 1099. So it's that pink box form, I call it. That can substitute for a social security card. That is the only thing that can substitute for a social security card. But besides those two things, we cannot accept any other proof of identity. Okay, so please make sure you bring that with you to your appointment. Also, of course, bring your W-2s. If you have a pension, your 1099-Rs. If you receive unemployment during the year, please make sure that you bring the form for that, which is called a 1099-G. Unfortunately, New York State Labor, they don't automatically mail those out to you. You have to opt into it when you receive the unemployment. So if you do not get those in the mail in January or perhaps early February, you can go on to the Department of Labor website and print it out from your online account. Please make sure if you got unemployment during 2022, you bring that form in. That is the most common form that is usually missing when people come for their appointments. Okay, so besides all that, the only other thing is, for example, if you are self-employed, we can do those returns. Usually those will be ride-sharing employees, so like Uber or Lyft. Please make sure you have all your documentation in regards to your income and expenses, particularly the mileage. Some of the ride-sharing companies and some of them will be better at keeping track of your mileage than others. Some of those companies don't keep track of it at all, and they expect you to keep track of it. So please make sure before you come to your appointment that you have all of your documentation in regards to income and expenses for that, particularly your mileage, because that can be a nice big deduction for the year. So yes. And that's basically it. So again, call 211 about mid-January, press the button for free taxes, and then just tell the operator that you want to make an appointment. Thank you. Oh, and just one other thing I want to say. So, I do want to say I really enjoy working with Joe and his team. Sometimes we have some clients that have some issues that we as a VitaSite can't handle. So for example, more like legal type stuff that you might have to work with the IRS with. In those cases, we will refer you to Joe and his team, and they have been excellent. I have personally gotten testimonies from clients that I referred to Joe. Very good testimonies. So, so thank you, Joe, and your team for that.
Oh, well, thank you, Andrew. We appreciate you participating in this town hall. And I wanted to let viewers know that try to pay attention to the press releases coming out of the United Way Greater Capital Region, because the VITA operations, they are going to be having a town hall in January. And so they have the town hall, they have a few press releases, they have announcements on their Facebook page, as do we, about the start of the filing season, about it opening up, and about VITA operations. So when a client contacts me, here at the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic, I'll get their returns. Many times I'll see that they've gone to a paid preparer like Jackson Hewitt or H&R Block. Again, they charge generally between $250 and $400 per return. So you can save that money if you qualify to receive the VITA services. They're free. And, if you are so inclined, you could end up saving that money. Be on the lookout for additional information to come out about the free tax prep services offered in the community by the United Way. They have a bunch of publicity pushes that they'll disseminate with further information. And I'll be participating in a town hall later in January that is sponsored by the United Way Greater Capital Region and their VITA operators. So thank you so much Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you, Joe.
Andrew and his staff, they attend to tax return preparation and filing. Our LITC does not generally attend to those tasks. So if you're missing your return and you need a return file, for this upcoming season, you would want to contact 211
Yes.
and Andrew's VITA volunteers, and they can take care of that for you. If you have a problem with your return, if your refund doesn't come in a timely manner, if you're waiting for your refund and you want to know where it is, if you get a letter from the IRS in the mail or a notice, they don't call them letters, they call them notices. If you get something in the mail from the IRS, you can give us a call here at the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic. We're operated as part of the Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York. And then we can provide you with advice or representation services about that. That's really all Xiao Xiao and I do here all day long, is resolve tax concerns and issues that filers may have. One of the things that we help clients with is resolving back tax debt. So quick reminder, you always want to timely file your tax return, even if you cannot afford to remit payment for the amount that is due. Always file the return on time, because if you don't, there's a second penalty that arises that you may be held responsible for. That is a penalty for failing to timely file, and there's also a penalty for failing to timely pay. So always timely file the return. A payment is not required with the return if you have a balance due. Still timely file the return to avoid that one penalty. And then you can contact us about what should we do about the balance due on this return. You have a number of options. So just contact us and we can discuss those options with you, and we can help you with that. You can ask the IRS for a payment plan, a monthly payment plan. That's one option. The second option, sometimes available, a tax debt settlement offer. And you may have seen those commercials on TV. I had $100,000 in tax debt. I settled the tax debt for a $100 payment. I paid the $100. Now all of my tax debt is gone. You may have seen those commercials on TV. We do those as well. There's no charge for our services. But we file tax debt settlement offers on behalf of clients here who have contacted us with balances due, and they have a balance due with the IRS. We can also ask the IRS, depending on your circumstances, to hold off on any collection activity. We can ask the IRS to mark the account with the balance due as currently not collectible, or CNC. If the IRS agrees, then it will stop collection activity during the period of time that the account is marked currently not collectible, or CNC. It can last a year, it can last many years, but if that's the case, then the IRS will not pursue any collection activity, but for taking any refund that you might be due in later years and electronically applying that to the balance due on the earlier tax period. As I mentioned, the IRS is extremely backed up at this point, and so it is taking a long period of time for us to get our tax debt settlement offers heard, and for us to arrange for installment agreements or payment plans. But keep in mind too, anytime the IRS makes a decision that you disagree with, anytime the IRS takes some action that you disagree with or fails to act and you disagree with that, we can pursue an appeal, or you can pursue an appeal with our assistance. So there's always the option to appeal some determination the IRS makes regarding an amount due or a refund. There are some changes to the tax law, which are in effect for this upcoming filing season. And the other staff attorney that we have here in the LITC, Xiao Pan, he's going to briefly address with you some of the new changes to the law, which may affect your filing of a tax return in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you, Joe. I will just briefly talk about the changes to some of the credits for this tax year, the 2022 tax year. First is the child tax credit. So last year, 2021, the Biden administration had this so-called enhanced child tax credit, which made the credit wholly refundable and increased the maximum amount of the child tax credit to $3,000 or $3,600, depending on the age of the qualifying child, and also eliminated earned income requirement, increased the age limit, and sent out half of the credit via advanced monthly payment. But these changes were for 1 year only, and the Congress was not able to extend this enhanced child tax credit to 2022 tax year. So the Congress currently is trying to pass a spending bill, but it looks unlikely there will be a child tax credit change attached to the spending bill when or if the bill is passed. So we're back to the pre-2021 child tax credit. So the maximum amount of the child tax credit is now $2,000, and it's only partially refundable. Up to $1,500 can be refundable to taxpayer depending on your income level. And the age limit of the qualified child goes down to 16 years old. And also there is the earned income requirement to claim this credit. So for people whose only income is Social Security benefits, like disabled benefits or retirement benefits, they are no longer eligible for the child tax credit for this year. And of course, there is no more monthly payment this tax year. So that's the change to the child tax credit. Next is the EITC, the earned income tax credit. Again, we're back to the pre-2021 EITC rule. Probably the biggest impact is for the working taxpayers who don't have a child. Last year, for those so-called childless workers, the minimum age to be eligible for EITC is 19 years old, but now it goes back to the previous level, which is 25 years old. Also last year, the maximum age limit for childless workers was eliminated, but now this year, the 65 years old age limit is back. Also, the amount of this childless EITC drops from $1,502 last year to $560 this year. And there are also some inflation-based adjustments to the earned income requirement and also the phase-out range of the EITC. You can check with your return preparer or like advisor to see if you're eligible for EITC. So next changes the child and the dependent care credit. So that is credit for expenses you pay for childcare or for adult dependent. So the big change to this credit is that last year, the child and dependent care credit was fully refundable, but this year the credit is non-refundable, which means this credit can only be used to lower your tax bill on your 2022 tax return. Also, the maximum amount of this credit for this year is $2,100 instead of $8,000 in 2021. Another change is there is no more so-called above-the-line charitable deductions. During COVID, taxpayer could take up to $600 charitable donation deduction on their tax returns. Because it is above the line, the $600 deduction can directly lower your taxable income amount. However, in 2022, on your tax return, if you take a standard deduction, you may not be able to take above the line deduction for charitable donations, or charitable deduction must be itemized. But of course, if your income is lower a certain amount, you're not able to do itemized deduction. Lastly, there's one thing that does not change from last year. That is the premium tax credit, the PTC. That is a refundable credit that helps eligible individuals and their families cover the premiums for their health insurance purchased through the health insurance marketplace. So pre-2021, for taxpayer with household income above 400% of the federal poverty line, they cannot qualify for the PTC. But last year, the American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA, temporarily eliminated this rule. And the ARPA covers both tax year 2021 and 2022. So again, for this tax year, there is no income limitation regarding the eligibility of the PTC.
Thank you, Xiao. I appreciate that. So as we mentioned at the start of the video, our low-income taxpayer clinic, we serve a 16-county area. We're based out of Albany, New York. We go south of Albany into, or we cover Columbia County, all of Columbia County. We also go north through Peru and Plattsburgh, all the way up to the Canadian border. We go east in the counties there, all the way to the Vermont border, and then we go pretty far west. We have a staff attorney in an office, a legal aid society office in Canton, who assists us from time to time with some of our concerns and our issues pertaining to clients who live way out on either the northern or the western edge of our 16 county service area. His name is PJ Hearn. We appreciate his assistance very much. And he's going to speak a little bit about his service area and his practice area in case anyone listening to the live presentation or the recording has questions and resides in those areas. So PJ, thank you for joining us today. If you could speak a little bit about your background, your experience, and the services that you offer out there in Canton as well.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Zao. Thanks. And I would like to say, being way up here, it's been great to have the LITC available through legal aid. I mean, one of the great things that we can do, and I've done this, I think, pretty solidly over the last years, we will get a client that's sometimes facing a housing issue, an eviction issue, and a tax issue will rise. And rather than having to, wait on the phone somewhere, sometimes we can actually craft the question that the client has and be able to forward that to the taxpayer clinic, to either Joe, Zhao, or Ann, and be able to get a quicker response back without having the person wait online. So we've been able to use that and assist the clients we have way up north here, and that's worked out very well. Myself, I joined legal aid, the 3-year anniversary coming up in January. I do primarily eviction prevention plus foreclosure work. And we also do a project here on the San Francisco Mohawk Indian Reserve where I'm from. And in fact, today I'm there doing our legal aid day here at the reserve. And so through that process, we've been able to actually assist clients here in the reserve as well, actually getting client intakes and being able to talk to the clinic and having Joe's assistance and filing papers with the IRS that way. But I think that the big thing is, even though you might not be located close to Albany, understanding we are 4 hours by vehicle away from Albany, doesn't mean that we can't extend the services to reach out to everybody up here and actually get those questions answered for you. And if the case does come up where we think representation might be necessary, we can work with the clinic like we've had in the past. I've had a couple of clients here in the reserve, been able to actually come in as clients through the clinic and get IRS representation. So although we're far away, I do know we have some tax preparing services here in the North Country, but they're not full-time like we see down in Albany that the clinic can access as well. So I think that's been one of the great things working for legal aid, is just getting access to the clinic and the services of legal aid. So thanks again to everybody involved, and hopefully you keep answering my emails. Thanks.
Thank you, PJ. We appreciate that a lot. So again, just to recap, if you have a question or concern about your taxes, your tax matters, feel free to give us a call or send us an email, get in touch with us. We provide tax representation, tax controversy services. So if you just need a return prepared and filed, you may be able to get that done by contacting Vida and Andrew's office. If you have some concern with your taxes other than simply getting the return filed and prepared, you can contact us. If you receive a notice in the mail from the IRS, a letter, if your return is not processed in due course, If you have an exam, if you get a penalty, if you have a balance due that you're not able to pay, if you owe tax to the IRS that you're not able to pay, those are the sorts of things that we handle on a regular basis. We also see situations where someone has not filed a return, but their identity has been stolen, and someone has filed a return for them, for a client, and then taken the refund. So there are unfortunately some tax scams out there. The IRS identifies them on its website, and we wanted to address those for you as well. And Xiaoxiao is going to talk a little bit about some of the common tax scams, which we hope that you can avoid. But if you do have a problem with one of these scams, feel free to contact us as well. Xiaoxiao?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Joe. Before talking about scams, I want to mention another change to this year's tax return is that the 1099-K form. So starting from this year, the third-party payment settlement network, such as like PayPal, Venmo, they will be required to send out the form, a 1099-K, to individuals who paid over $600 for goods or services that they were involved with. So that's a big change from previous years. So previously, so individuals you received, they have to make at least 200 transactions, and you received more than $20,000. That only triggered the reporting of the 1099-K, but now it's only one single transaction if it exceeds $600. The third-party network will send you a 1099-K form and also report that income to the IRS, and the taxpayer is required to report that income on the tax return as well. So if you sold anything on eBay or Etsy during 2022 and the amount is higher than $600, you should be expected to receive a 1099-K form by the end of January 2023. Just a few words about the scams. So the IRS, they do publish something called a 30 dozen tax scams every year. So for 2022, the IRS, they highlighted like pandemic-related scams, such as the EIP scams, tax refund scams, the suspicious communications, and like spear phishing. These emails use IRS logo or use like some threatening or urgent messages to trick taxpayers into opening the link or attachment to the email. Please be aware that IRS, they will never use text messages or email to discuss personal tax issues or personal identifying information. And the IRS will never leave like pre-recorded or threatening phone messages. And the IRS will never call or threaten to bring in the police to have the taxpayer arrested for not paying. All these types of messages or emails are scams. And also, when you do receive a mail, make sure it is a legit mail from the IRS. You can look at where the address of the sender, like if the typo in the mail, or if the letter gives a phone number to call, maybe you want to Google that to see if that's a legit IRS phone number. So just to be aware of the scam. Usually during the tax filing season, there will be more tax scams coming up.
Thank you, Xiaoxiao. So if someone has filed a tax return for you and it was not a return that you filed, could be a case of identity theft, and you're welcome to call us to get that resolved. We ask the IRS to remove from your account the fraudulent return and then set the account back to zero balance, no return filed. And we have had really good results for our clients who have encountered those circumstances. We also get clients who contact us because they have incurred a penalty. So the three most frequently seen penalties are failure to timely file their return, a failure to timely pay any tax due, and an accuracy related penalty. If you do file a return and you owe $1,000 and you can't pay the $1,000, you file the return, the IRS will send you a bill in a few months. And the bill won't be for $1,000. The bill will be for a little bit more than $1,000, because if you miss the 4/15 payment deadline, the IRS will tack on interest, and the IRS will also tack on a penalty. For the purposes of this presentation, it's important to know you can ask the IRS to remove the penalty for you. If you get a penalty for failing to timely file the return, if you get a penalty for failing to timely pay the tax owed, or if there's an exam and the IRS is proposing a penalty for failing to be accurate on the return, you can contact us. We have a ton of experience asking the IRS to remove penalties on clients' accounts. So the penalty is, it's an extra dollar amount that the IRS says that you owe. So if you originally filed a return and you owed $1,000 worth of tax, the IRS might send you a bill for $1,050. The other 50 is the financial penalty that the IRS has put on there. So if you have a balance due with the IRS, or if you receive a notice in the mail about how you're being subjected to an examination where the return is being examined, feel free to give us a call, because we can ask or assist you in asking the IRS to remove those penalties for you. There are right now big delays at the IRS. So our practice here in the LITC has changed and been modified a bit, because it's extremely difficult to reach the IRS by phone, and their mail, if you send them something by mail, is also extremely backed up, So there are delays at the IRS. Keep in mind that if you electronically file a return this spring, generally the refund will be released to you in 3 to 6 weeks, 4 to 7 weeks. It's not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed. So we don't recommend that you pre-arrange your finances, in anticipation of a large refund check coming from the IRS. The refund payment can be delayed for a variety of reasons. There is a portal on irs.gov that you can log into to check the status of your refund. It's not always accurate or up to date. It's only updated once a day, so you only need to check once a day if you are looking at the portal. You can also give us a call, and we can try and assist you in resolving those concerns. But we do recognize that a lot of folks will be watching this video in a pre-recorded fashion on Facebook or via our website. You're welcome to get in touch with us if you have a question or concern about your taxes. If your refund is overdue, I get calls like that all the time. If you get a letter in the mail from the IRS, I get calls like that all the time too. We have a ton of experience getting those situations resolved and unwound, and making sure that the client goes on their merry way with everything straightened out.
If the client's eligible, we can assess as to whether we can give advice. We can always give advice. We can look at whether we can do full representation. I know we're coming to the end. We do actually have a question. I don't know if this is somebody who might be going to a VITA or looking to go to a VITA, or so whichever of you would like to answer it is fine. Someone who is starting a business, does not have, is still in the process of setting up the business. They're filing an individual return, and they're wondering how to handle their expenses.
Yeah, so I just wanted to answer that quickly. Thank you, Anne, for bringing that to my attention. You would use a Schedule C. You don't have a business name or company yet. So you're just filing under your name, Joe's Pizza Parlor or, Joe's Barbershop. That's fine. You would use a Schedule C. You would use a Schedule C. You would report your income on your sales, your receipts on the top of the Schedule C, and you would report your expenses on the bottom half of the Schedule C. And then you would net everything out and carry that net figure over to the 1040, and that would be your net income. The standard deduction or the itemized deduction, that has nothing to do with your business income and your business expenses. You delineate your business expenses on the bottom of the Schedule C. You put your income on the top. You don't need to have a formal business name or formal business filings. You're just reporting your income and your expenses. One thing that I would caution you on that the IRS does examine Schedule Cs for. And one quick provision that I would caution you about. If the business has not started performing the operations for which it was organized, any expenses you have incurred should be characterized as startup expenses and then amortized. So if I open a pizza parlor and I haven't yet begun serving pizza to the public, any expenses I incur before I take that action would be characterized as startup expenses and would need to be amortized on the Schedule C. If I open a barbershop and I start advertising, I incur expenses, I get a lease of some commercial space, maybe in Crossgates Mall, and I put a down payment down, but I haven't actually yet started clipping hair, doing haircuts. I haven't started yet performing the services. I haven't started yet performing the operations for which the business was organized. Then any expenses are characterized as startup expenses and would need to be amortized on the Schedule C. You can deduct the expenses in full when the business begins performing the operations for which it was organized, actually selling pizza, actually doing haircuts in my example. The standard deduction and the itemized deduction have utterly nothing to do with the Schedule C. Most people these days are taking the itemized deduction. So don't worry about the standard deduction or the itemized deduction with respect to your question. Just make sure that you have a recordation of the income that you earned and the expenses that you incurred. And you would use the Schedule C.
And Andrew, is this something that VITA would be able to help with, or is this beyond what you,
That's a good question. This is really the first time I've personally seen at a VITA site something like this in terms of a startup cost. I would say that because I think the person asking the questions mentioned that they didn't even have a name yet necessarily for the business. So in that particular case, to err on the side of caution, I would say that VITA wouldn't be able to do it just because he doesn't have the name of his business. He's still getting it set up. He or she, I should say, is still getting it set up. I would probably, to be on the safe side, say we couldn't do it, especially if, like Joe said, there's what's called amortization involved, which is basically spreading out the costs over years and years. That we certainly can't do. I know for a fact that's out of our scope. So if that is involved in this process, we can't do it. Even if it isn't necessarily involved in the process, I think just because the name hasn't been set up yet, there's no, perhaps the person's applying for an EIN, a ID number for the business, which I don't believe has happened yet. I would be on the safe side. I would say we can't do it.
okay.
Not 100% sure. That's just to be cautious. I would say we can't do it.
But our LITC does work closely with Andrew's VITAs. So do give us a call, 833-628-0087. If people do have a question, we can see if it's something that our VITA can answer as an advice question. We can always talk to, Andrew and the VITAs to see if that would be something that would make sense, given what we don't want to get too much into people's specific questions, but on our town hall, but do give a call, and we all do work very closely together and would be
Yes.
happy to try and help. And up in PJ's service area, PJ also works very closely with us as well. So sort of no wrong door here. Please do come and ask questions.
Yes.
I think we're right at the end of our session. I want to thank you all for joining us, and thank you to Andrew, thank you to PJ, Joe, Shao, and thank you to our lovely LASNNY support, Jennifer and Mallory, for helping us put this on Facebook. I hope everyone has a great day, and do call us if you have questions.